I looked after my friend's grandkids, but I got tired, so I'm gonna leave them with you. Think of it as practice. Despite being put on strict bed rest due to a threatened preterm birth, my mother-in-law thrust 3 kids upon me, claiming they're her friend's grandchildren, and began to nap on the sofa. The kids run around the house non-stop, not listening even when I call out to them. In my desperation, I called my husband at work for help. However, he merely responded, "They're family, so you gotta help out your mom," pushing me aside. Out of sheer desperation, I made another call. And as a result, karma caught up with my mother-in-law. My name is Jessica. I got married to Mike, whom I met through a mutual friend, and am currently expecting our first child. Mike works for the company that his father, Bob, runs, and we live in an apartment near Mike's parents' home. There were discussions about living together when we got married, but Bob suggested that I might feel more comfortable if we had our space. However, since we moved just a 10-minute walk away from my in-laws, my mother-in-law, Susan, started visiting us quite often. Being a sociable person with numerous activities and classes, Susan initially seemed to be trying to bond with me. Stopping by after a walk or shopping and having a short chat was manageable, even if it happened a few times a week. But gradually, her visits became longer, often requiring her to step inside our house. Recently, this has become the norm. Having her over means preparing tea and snacks, and I can't relax or neglect the household chores. Though Susan says, "Make yourself comfortable," it's not that simple. Her visits began to feel like a burden. But I still wanted to maintain a good relationship. It was tough for me to ask her to visit less often. I hoped Mike would speak to Susan, but when I approached him, he merely said that there's no need to be formal with family. He even suggested I learn cooking and household chores from Susan, indirectly expressing his dissatisfaction with me, which was disheartening. There were times I thought it might have been better if we lived together. But that would mean enduring Susan's never-ending stories daily, which were frankly exhausting. Susan doesn't really have any substantial content in her stories. They're often about topics she saw on TV or friends of hers that I don't know. She just talks non-stop. Bob doesn't listen to her, so I guess that's why she comes to my place, hoping for someone to listen. Now that I think about it, even Mike never really paid attention to Susan's stories. Any attentive listener would do for Susan. Proof of that is when she has her social club meetings and can chat to her heart's content, she doesn't come to my place. One day, as I was thinking of ways to reduce Susan's visiting hours, I discovered I was pregnant. Being my first pregnancy, I wanted to find the right timing to tell everyone. However, upon hearing the news, Mike, perhaps too overjoyed, immediately informed Susan and Bob. I appreciate their happiness for us, but I haven't even reached the stable phase of my pregnancy yet. Mike suggested I could get some advice from Susan. He even asked her to check up on me, leading to her visiting even more frequently, sometimes staying for lunch or even dinner. Bob is the only one who seems concerned about my condition, whereas Mike and Susan just keep saying that moving around would help with an easier delivery. They don't help around the house at all. When morning sickness hit harder than I expected and I wanted to lie down, Susan would still come over and meddle with household matters. Maybe it was the stress of those days, but during a routine checkup, I was diagnosed with a risk of preterm birth and was told to rest. The doctor advised me to get support from my family for household chores, but I wasn't sure if that was feasible given the current circumstances. But considering the baby, I knew I couldn't just keep quiet. I decided to talk to Mike as soon as he gets home, ask him to help with chores, and stop Susan's frequent visits. I was hopeful that Mike would understand. But as soon as I laid down on my bed, the doorbell rang repeatedly. I wasn't expecting any visitors, and considering the incessant ringing, I instantly knew it was Susan. She probably knew about my doctor's appointment and timed her visit accordingly. I had just been told to rest. And even if I could stay in bed, with Susan's incessant talking, I wouldn't get any rest. So, I decided to pretend I wasn't home. After ringing the bell for a while and getting no response, Susan finally seemed to give up. Feeling a bit guilty, I closed my eyes hoping to get some sleep. However, to my surprise, I heard Susan's voice inside the house saying, "Are you here?" I heard footsteps approaching, and suddenly my bedroom door opened. "There you are. Why are you in bed in the middle of the day?" I had locked the front door, but somehow, Susan was inside. "Susan, how did you?" Looking puzzled, she flashed a key in front of me. It was a spare key to our house, and it seemed Mike had given it to her without my knowledge. I had repeatedly asked Mike to tell Susan to limit her visits, and I was infuriated to learn that he'd given her a spare key instead. Unfazed, Susan continued to criticize, mentioning how dusty my room was. I informed her of my risk of preterm birth as told by the doctor. "I need to rest, so I can't entertain you today. I'll be in bed," I said, hinting that she should leave. But she didn't take the hint and showed no signs of concern. She proceeded to open a window and called out, "Come on in." After that, I heard loud footsteps, and 3 energetic boys I'd never seen before appeared. They were 3 energetic young boys. They all looked somewhat similar, suggesting they might be brothers. While they didn't enter the room immediately, they peeked in from the doorway. "I'm babysitting my friend's grandkids, but handling all 3 is quite tiring. I'll take a nap in the living room. You can put them to sleep here. It's a good practice for when you have your child," Susan said nonchalantly. With that, she told the kids to nap with me and swiftly moved to the living room. The boys, interpreting this as permission to enter, rushed into my bedroom. In no time, my bedroom, with only a bed for Mike and me, turned into a playground. The boys showed no intention of napping and began jumping on the bed and playing tag. No matter how much I tried to calm them, they were engrossed in their play. In this chaotic situation, I decided to call Mike for help. I called his work phone and explained the situation, asking him to come home as soon as possible. "Mike, the doctor said I'm at risk of preterm birth and told me to rest. But these kids are running around non-stop. Can you please come home?" I was genuinely scared at that moment. The kids' actions were becoming more boisterous, and I feared one might accidentally bump into me. I was on the verge of tears, dreading any potential harm to my unborn child. However, even as I pleaded with Mike in a tearful voice, he seemed not to grasp my fear. "You can't expect me to just come home," he said in exasperation. "Mom's been handling those energetic kids and she's tired. Why don't you help out? Think of it as parenting practice." Shockingly, Mike echoed Susan's sentiment and hung up the phone. Despite my repeated attempts to call him back, he didn't answer, and the children began trying to jump from Mike's bed to mine. I faced the kids and couldn't help but blurt out, "Stop!" in a loud voice. The children looked at me with surprised expressions, and while they did stop their bed-jumping antics, they continued to chase each other around the room. How long were these kids going to be here? When would Susan ever wake up from her nap? Feeling helpless, I clutched my smartphone in despair. It was then that I spotted a certain name on the screen, and in my desperation, I called that person. By the time Susan finally woke up, it was already late in the afternoon. I guess I overslept. I was exhausted from playing with the kids. She yawned and got up to find the kids. But the previously noisy kids were now silent. Susan peeked into the bedroom where she last saw the children, but no one was there. When she finally made her way to the kitchen, she was in for another shock. The 3 children were quietly sitting at the dining table, munching on snacks. Lying on the couch, watching over them, was me, and standing next to me was Bob's sister, Kate. "You finally woke up," said Kate when she noticed Susan's entrance. Indeed, in my desperation, the person I'd turned to was Kate. Living just an hour's drive away, she came immediately after I called her. Since the wedding, Kate had taken a special liking to me. Apparently, Kate had always wanted a daughter, but never had children of her own. She seemingly saw me, her nephew's wife, as the daughter she never had. When I shared the news of my pregnancy, Kate, having been a nurse and having worked in pediatrics for a long time, reassured me, saying, If you ever need help or advice, don't hesitate to reach out. Never did I expect that challenge to involve Susan, but Kate, without a hint of annoyance, had come to help. The children, who had been running around non-stop, immediately calmed down upon Kate's arrival and soon took their afternoon naps. Exhausted from their playtime and under Kate's guidance, they drifted off quickly. The children had been playing non-stop and were undoubtedly exhausted. In the silence of the room, where only the soft breathing of the sleeping kids could be heard, I finally let out a sigh of relief. After the kids took their nap, I filled Kate in on everything that had transpired. First, Kate expressed concern for my well-being, then she promised to talk to Susan as well. From now on, you just focus on the baby in your belly and take care of yourself, Kate advised. Her words reassured me, and I opened up about my anxieties and what I foresaw in the future. After chatting with Kate for a while, the kids began to stir from their nap. Kate then explained to the children that I was expecting, encouraging them to be gentle and understanding. As I had suspected, the kids were siblings. The two older brothers remembered their mom being pregnant with their youngest brother and were compassionate towards me. The youngest, following his elder sibling's example, tried his best to be considerate. I realized these were genuinely kind-hearted kids, and it warmed my heart. I apologized for raising my voice earlier, and the children apologized for running around and jumping on the bed. We all made up. As we all sat down for snacks and began cleaning up, Susan finally woke up from her nap and came looking for the kids. Despite her surprise at seeing Kate, Susan started making excuses. According to her, she had brought the kids to my home to give me some practice in child rearing. She assumed that since the kids were tired from playing, even someone inexperienced like me would be able to put them to bed with ease. Hence, she had taken her nap first. I can't believe you called Kate. I didn't think you'd be so overwhelmed by the kids, Susan remarked, implying that the fault lay with me. But since I had already confided everything to Kate, Susan's excuses only exasperated her. I was too flabbergasted to even counter Susan's claims. Oblivious to our disbelief, Susan kept rambling with her justifications until a call from a friend interrupted her. Apparently, the friend, expecting the kids at Susan's house and finding it empty, had called in confusion. Naturally, this friend and I had never met, so the idea that the kids were at a stranger's home never crossed her mind. Once informed by Susan, the friend hurriedly made her way to my house. Upon seeing her grandchildren safe and sound, she visibly relaxed and then apologized to me. She even noticed my pregnancy at a glance and promised to visit again with another apology. The children waved at Kate and me with a hint of reluctance as they left. Although the situation had felt threatening at one point, thanks to Kate, I felt we ended up spending a delightful time with the kids. As we bid farewell to the children, Susan sneakily tried to leave too. However, Kate stopped her and explained the potential risks and dangers of my condition. There's even a chance she might lose the baby, Kate told Susan sternly, but Susan's only response was, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Despite her friend's apparent frustration at Susan's reckless behavior, Susan showed no signs of remorse. Amidst all this, Bob and Mike returned home. It seemed Kate had informed Bob about my condition, prompting him to wrap up his work early and bring Mike home. I'm sorry we're late. Jessica, are you feeling okay? Bob inquired, genuine concern evident in his voice. However, Mike appeared discontented, probably still underestimating the seriousness of my condition. Mike hadn't been helpful with the housework since he learned about my pregnancy and the start of my morning sickness. In fact, when I was feeling especially sick and asked for his help, he would get very upset. He kept saying, "It's not an illness." If he still feels that way, I had no confidence in our ability to raise our child together in the future. Kate explained my condition to all three of them, emphasizing that I needed to rest right now. Before Mike could argue with his usual, "It's not an illness" retort, Bob declared he would take me back to my parents' home. Apparently, Bob had been cautioning Susan about her frequent visits to our home for a while. Susan had been claiming she was counseling me and helping with chores, but she hadn't done any of that. Bob had noticed this and was trying to figure out how to restrain her when today's incident occurred. You guys being around means Jessica can't rest properly. For the sake of the baby in her womb, going back home for the birth is the best decision. Bob explained. Even after hearing this, Susan continued to repeat. That wasn't my intention. To make matters worse, Mike started to defend Susan, saying, Mom was just trying to help Jessica. He probably thought it'd be a good child-rearing practice. They seemed to get along well in the end, didn't they? The reason we ended up getting along with the kids was thanks to Kate. The thought of facing that situation alone still chills me to the bone, and I had lost trust in Mike, who didn't come to my aid when I called for help. Kate, acting on my behalf, packed my belongings and informed my parents that I would be returning home. Mike and Susan tried to stop me, but I ignored their pleas and got into Bob's car. Bob and Kate kindly drove me to my parents' home. Bob felt responsible for not being able to stop Susan, but I knew I could rely on him and Kate. I'll talk to Mike when we get home. I hope you two won't divorce, but it's your decision, Jessica. Whatever you decide, we'll support you. Bob kindly told me. I was so grateful for Bob's compassionate words. When we arrived at my parents' house, Kate briefed them about everything. Without passing any judgment about my future with Mike, they warmly welcomed me. When it was time to bid farewell to Bob and Kate, I expressed my wish for them to meet my child, regardless of whether I divorced Mike. After a few months, I safely gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. When the labor pains started, I didn't inform Mike. I had decided to let him know about the birth only after our child was safely delivered. Eventually, I contacted him and decided to return to our shared home. I had initially thought of divorcing him and raising the child alone, but when I saw my daughter's face, I realized she wouldn't exist without him. Naturally, I wanted him to meet her. On the day I was to return, Mike came to pick me up. When he saw our daughter outside my parents' house, he teared up and whispered, "Thank you," to me. Mike and I hadn't been in touch much while I was away, but he seemed to have changed. Our daughter instantly fell asleep in her car seat, allowing Mike and I to have a heart-to-heart talk. It seemed Kate had given Mike quite a stern talking to while I was gone, prompting him to reconsider his views. He hadn't realized how much a pregnancy can affect a woman's body and had dismissed my discomfort as mere exaggeration. Mike told me he had studied various books and prepared to welcome our daughter while waiting for me. Seeing our safely born daughter, he was overwhelmed with emotion and realized how dangerously he had treated me, expressing how scared it made him feel now. From now on, we'll be raising this little life that can't fend for itself yet. I was happy that Mike understood and shared that fear with me. Mike also informed me about Susan. After I returned to my parents' home, Susan was reprimanded by Kate, much like Mike had been. Given her past behavior, Bob was quite angry with Susan, too. Despite being scolded by both, all Susan said was, "I didn't mean it like that," showing no understanding of my condition whatsoever. Bob decided that if I ever came back, it would be dangerous if Susan approached, so he banned her from our home. Though Susan protested, with Mike's change of heart from Kate's words, she had no allies left. She had no choice but to accept the ban and return her spare key. Later, one of Susan's friends came to apologize. Upon learning I had moved back to my parents, she seemed deeply concerned, suspecting it might have been because of her grandchildren. It wasn't due to the kids, but because of Susan, as Mike clarified. Hearing that, and considering her grandchildren were brought to a stranger's house without her knowledge, she severed ties with Susan. Apparently, Susan met her friend through some shared activity, and now she couldn't even attend that after being ostracized. Despite this, Susan doesn't think she's at fault. She's been causing trouble with other friends, and both Mike and Bob feel they can't deal with her anymore. Dad might even divorce Mom, Mike mentioned. Recently, Bob has rarely been returning to his family home, and apparently, he's rented a place near our apartment. By the time the story about Susan ended, we arrived at our home. Bob and Kate were there to greet us. Seeing our daughter, still asleep, they smiled joyfully, which warmed my heart. Thanks to Mike and Bob, the house was even cleaner than when I had left for my parents. Mike planned to take paternity leave soon, based on Bob's suggestion. Though I hadn't informed Mike, my parents had mentioned that they'd occasionally visit to check on things. Kate had been keeping an eye on Mike since I went to my parents, but I'm sure he's going to be a good father and husband. I had started to trust Mike again. Though I had once feared for my safety, our daughter was born without any issues. Surrounded by trustworthy people like Mike, Bob, and Kate, I felt confident about raising her. We currently don't intend to let Susan into this circle. Without our permission, she won't be able to see her grandchild. It seems people are gradually distancing from Susan, but when will she realize this? Hey! You awake? If so, get out of the hospital quick, you useless wife. An unfamiliar man suddenly yelled at me, just as I was waking up. Excuse me, who are you? Are you sure you got the right person? Upon hearing my words, the man seemed taken aback for a moment, but then quickly smirked. Huh? Who the heck is this guy? Gives me the creeps. If you don't remember, that's fine. Just hurry up and get back home, useless wife. With a nasty remark and an unsettling grin, the man left the room. What on earth happened to me? Today, I want you to hear about the worst day of my life from 2 years ago. My name is Hazel Thompson. A divorced 32-year-old. 2 years prior, at the age of 30, I woke up in a hospital bed. Waking up, I was surrounded by an eerie feeling. Because I couldn't understand why I was in such a place. Why was I lying in a hospital bed? What on earth happened to me? No matter how hard I tried to recall, I couldn't remember anything before falling asleep. When I tried to sit up, a sharp pain shot through my head. Ouch! I touched my head and felt a bandage. Did I hurt my head? But why? Since waking up, my mind was filled with questions. While I was still confused, a man approached me. Hey! You awake? If so, get out of here quick, you useless wife. He glared at me and suddenly shouted. Excuse me, who are you? You sure you got the right person? I didn't recognize the man and hesitantly spoke to him. My words made the man's eyes widen in surprise. He looked really mad, maybe he confused me with someone else. I gave the man a friendly smile, hoping he'd realize his mistake and move on. That's what I thought. But instead of leaving, he looked at me with a puzzled expression and started asking like, do you not remember? Don't you know why you're here? I nodded honestly, and he smirked eerily and was like, if you don't remember, I guess that's fine. If that's the case, no worries. Just hurry back home, you useless wife. Then he kicked my bed and stormed out of the room. Huh? Who was that guy? Creepy, right? He definitely mistook me for someone else. But boy, he sure acted like he owned the place. If he's someone's husband, that's just terrible. Lost in these thoughts, my mother entered the room, as if swapping places with the man. Hazel! You're awake! Thank goodness! Tears filled her eyes as she rushed to me. Mom, I'm sorry for worrying you. I'm okay. But just before you came in, some weird guy was here and he yelled at me. I think he confused me with someone else. Is everything all right? As I said this, my mother tilted her head and was like, huh? The guy who just left was Kyle, wasn't he? Did someone come in before Kyle? Kyle? Who's that? Who? Your husband. No way, Mom. Stop joking. What are you talking about? Just wait a second. Hazel, are you serious? Didn't you get married last year? You came to tell me how happy you were to get married before turning 30. Don't you remember? Mom, what are you talking about? I'm only 28. What do you mean before turning 30? Upon hearing this, my mother rushed out of the room in panic. Soon, doctors and nurses came rushing in, and I underwent various tests. I was later diagnosed with amnesia due to a severe head injury. It turned out I hadn't lost all my memories but had forgotten about the last 2 years since I met my husband, Kyle. It seems I've lost my memories from the age of 28 to 30. Which meant the man who had yelled at me earlier, Kyle, was indeed my husband. Kyle had yelled at me without showing any concern after I woke up. I wondered why I had married such a man. The next day, in the afternoon, the same man, supposedly my husband Kyle, visited the room. This time, he was accompanied by an older woman. Is this woman also someone I know? While I pondered that, she was like, "Look at that, you're already up. How long were you planning on lounging around?" Just like Kyle, instead of showing concern, she snapped at me. "Excuse me, but who are you?" Upon hearing my question, she looked surprised but retorted like, "Wow," just like Kyle said, "You really don't know me?" "I'm so sorry, I don't recognize you or the man from earlier either." Just like Kyle did yesterday, she smirked and was like, "Well, that's convenient." "Kyle, you played your cards right." What did she mean by played your cards right? When I looked puzzled, Kyle explained like, "You're my wife, and this is my mother." Got it? Apparently, this woman was his mother. In other words, my mother-in-law. "By the way, it's just a little injury, right? How long are you planning on staying in the hospital? Who's gonna cook our meals? And there's a pile of laundry. Hurry up and come home." Then, joining in, my mother-in-law exclaimed like, "That's right. Do you know how much this hospital stay is gonna cost? And what about work? You've been missing out, but the pay's still coming in, right?" Kyle and my mother-in-law kept nagging and blaming me. But when my mother came to visit, their attitude changed drastically. "Hazel, how are you feeling? Oh, you guys are here too." It seems Hazel has lost her memory from the time she met Kyle. Addressing the in-laws, my mother's voice trailed off. My mother-in-law was quickly like, "She hit her head, right? At least she looks okay." That's a relief. My mother-in-law hurriedly added like, "Well, we'll be off then." They hurriedly left. I asked my mother like, "Did I really marry that man?" "Yes. Kyle has always taken great care of you, and your mother-in-law was kind too. After getting married, you moved to the Thompsons' family home. Then, until yesterday, we didn't hear anything from you. Out of the blue, we were told you had an accident. What's been going on? Why didn't you contact us?" "No, Mom, that's what I'm saying. I don't remember anything. What happened?" I replied with a laugh, but I couldn't shake off the unease. The Kyle and mother-in-law I met after losing my memory were nothing like the caring and kind people my mother described. Their attitude had completely changed once my mother arrived. They seemed more concerned about house chores and money than me. Wait. Money? That reminds me, what's happening with my job? "Mom, speaking of which, I'm still continuing my work as a tax consultant, right?" "You're still working there." Mr. Johnson was concerned and said you should take it easy for now. After graduating from college, I acquired my CPA license. I got a job at Johnson's CPA firm. That's a relief. I'm still continuing with my job. But wait. Right now, it should be the middle of a weekday. My mother is a stay-at-home mother, and I've been given time off from the CPA office to recover. But what about those two? They came to the hospital, but aren't they working? The more I thought about Kyle and my mother-in-law, the more suspicious I became. And it wasn't just me. My mother, seeing my behavior, started to become suspicious of Kyle and his mother as well. Then the next day, I still couldn't recall my memories. Kyle and his mom visited the hospital again in the afternoon. "Hey, Hazel. Enough is enough. At first, I thought it was okay if you lost your memories, but how long are you gonna stay here? I've been telling you to come home and take care of me." Before the accident, how did I handle such harsh words from Kyle? But thinking about it, there's nothing I can do since I can't remember. No matter what you say, I don't remember you. I don't want to live with someone I don't know. Besides, I'm still receiving treatment. Why don't you take care of yourself? You're an adult, right? I boldly said that to Kyle. He then grabbed me by the collar, his face turning bright red, and was like, "You trying to defy me? I did you a favor by marrying a slowpoke like you. No one will want you if I leave you." His mother, my mother-in-law, chided Kyle like, "Didn't we agree you wouldn't raise your hand outside?" While saying that, she was like, "Kyle's right. We're putting up with a klutz like you. All you need to do is earn money and take care of us." Suddenly acting defiant and being cocky. Being hospitalized and wasting money. Whether it was from being grabbed by the collar or from their confrontation, a dull pain like I was hit with a blunt object ran through my head. Then, I remembered everything. It felt like a fog lifting from my mind, and everything became clear. From meeting Kyle to our married life, and why I had the accident. I remembered everything. But I couldn't let those two know that I regained my memory. Pretending to still have amnesia, I was like, "Stop it. I might not remember how I was before, but I'll call the police, okay?" Upon hearing this, Kyle let go of me, and my mother-in-law angrily remarked like, "You ungrateful wife. Don't get carried away." But again, their attitude changed dramatically as soon as my mother appeared. "Oh, hey. You've been visiting every day, haven't you?" With a forced smile, my mother-in-law addressed my mother. Today, a counselor also joined my mother. Apparently, there was going to be a discussion with Kyle, my mother-in-law, and my mother to help retrieve my memories. Though my memory had already returned, this seemed like the perfect opportunity. Without letting the counselor know I had remembered, we began the session. Kyle and my mother-in-law insisted there was no pressing need for me to force my memories back. And just like that, their attitude changed completely from just moments ago. Kyle spoke with a bright smile, detailing how harmoniously we had lived as a married couple up until now. My mother-in-law enthusiastically recounted how we lived like a real mother and daughter. Where did these two learn to act so convincingly? Their tales seemed so fabricated, it was clear they were enjoying spinning their web of lies. Hearing their stories, I couldn't help but frown. My mother, sensing something amiss, made eye contact with me. I felt sorry for the counselor, but when I asked if I could pose a question, she encouraged me to ask whatever I was curious about. I then asked Kyle and my mother-in-law like, "Have I always been a terrible wife?" The counselor exclaimed in shock like, "A terrible wife?" She exclaimed in surprise. My mother-in-law quickly retorted like, "Hazel, what are you talking about? What's gotten into you all of a sudden? Huh? Didn't you guys keep calling me a useless wife and klutz just yesterday and today?" "Oh my, we never said that. Are you sure you didn't mishear? But you've been telling me to hurry home and do the chores, calling me a useless wife, and saying things like you're putting up with someone as useless as me, right? Am I being bullied by you?" Upon saying this, my mother-in-law, drenched in sweat, interjected like, "Hazel, stop it. That's not true." My husband was like, "That's right, Hazel and Mom always got along really well." The two of them were visibly flustered. Far more than you'd expect if they really had a close relationship. I remember everything now. From our marriage up until the accident, they always burdened me with all the household chores. On top of that, my mother-in-law used to take most of my salary, claiming it was for living expenses. Facing Kyle, I inquired like, "By the way, Kyle, what do you do for a living?" "Huh?" He hesitated to respond. "I've been working at the accounting firm and doing all the housework, right? That means you must be so busy you can't do housework. Yet you come to the hospital every day at noon. What exactly are you doing?" "I took some time off from work because I was worried about you." "Really? So, what's your job?" "That's none of your business right now." Kyle was becoming increasingly agitated. "Shouldn't we be discussing everything openly during counseling?" I looked to the counselor for support, and she gave Kyle a curious glance. Kyle, turning a deep shade of red, declared like, "I'm currently out of work." "What's wrong with that?" he shouted back defiantly. So, you're unemployed then? Does that mean your mother works? When I asked that, my mother-in-law stammered like me. I am. Now, my mother-in-law began to get flustered. So, you're unemployed too? What? In our time, it was common for women to stay at home and look after the house. Your mother did the same thing. What's wrong with that? I could see their true colors as their temper flared. No one's saying being unemployed is a bad thing. But if that's the case, why was I doing all the housework even though I was working? Especially when both of you and Kyle had the time to share the chores. It just doesn't make sense to me. Getting increasingly frustrated, my mother-in-law snapped like, what are you trying to say? It's a given for a wife to do house chores. But you two were living off the money I earned, right? Isn't that a bit much? You don't get too big for your boots. It's only natural for you to earn money for Kyle's sake. Just be grateful you have someone like him. Finally, my mother-in-law, forgetting that my mother and the counselor were present, began to yell at me. What's going on? I'm clearly being tormented here. Why did I marry someone like this? Someone who won't even stand up for me when I'm being bullied by his mother? I married the worst kind of guy. When I said that, Kyle retorted like, you calling me the worst? Don't mess with me. You're lucky to be married to a catch like me. It's only natural you'd serve me. I can't stand this charade anymore. This hospital bill is such a waste of money. I don't have money to waste on you. Just come back home. Kyle shouted this, and my mother-in-law chimed in like, exactly. You've been hospitalized for days. How much is that gonna cost? We were just thinking of letting you stay at home during the summer because you said you'd obey and follow me. Kyle laughed along and added like, too bad, because you opposed Mom, your bedroom turned back into the barn. The counselor, who had been silently listening, exclaimed like, you had her sleep in a barn during this scorching summer? Caught off guard, the two stammered like, well, she was being rebellious. They desperately began to make excuses, but it was already too late. Then, my mother was like, what do you mean by making my daughter sleep in the barn? She confronted my mother-in-law and Kyle with those words. Turning to the counselor, my mother inquired like, you've been recording all of this conversation, right? The counselor had mentioned at the beginning that the sessions would be recorded for future reference. The counselor affirmed like, of course. Upon hearing this, Kyle and my mother-in-law began trembling and mumbled like, we're sorry. In a pitiable tone. But this was just the beginning. Shall we go for the finishing blow? I announced everyone like, I remember everything. Kyle and my mother-in-law jumped up, exclaiming like, we're so sorry. We repent. Please spare us any more of this. They were begging for forgiveness. But why should I forgive? I explained to everyone why I ended up being hospitalized. Back then, I was utterly brainwashed by the two of them. Even though I was initially tormented after our marriage, they'd be kind to me afterwards. I was relied on. Gradually, I began to feel that these two couldn't manage without me. With such a mindset, it's strange how I started to follow their every command. I was told not to contact my real parents, and I obeyed that without a second thought. More importantly, even when I was mistreated, I never felt that the treatment was unjust. Then came the day of the accident. Kyle would always come to my workplace, partly to keep an eye on me. But that day, by chance, he saw me greet my boss, Mr. Johnson. On the way home, inside the car, he yelled me like, were you always flirting with other men besides me, like you did just now? In a fit of rage, he pulled the car over, tried to drag me out of it. Even though I resisted desperately, Kyle pushed me so hard that I hit my head against the guardrail and fell onto the road. Ignoring me lying there, he drove away. Luckily, a passerby called an ambulance, and I was safely taken to the hospital. The reason for Kyle's smug smile when he realized I had lost my memory was his relief that it wouldn't be revealed that he was responsible for the accident. They probably came to the hospital not to visit me but to make sure I hadn't regained my memory. It happened on a major street. There are plenty of security cameras. If they check, they'll surely find footage of Kyle pushing me. If I report this to the police, Kyle will likely face charges. Frantically, Kyle pleaded like I didn't mean any harm. I was just jealous. I'll treat you right from now on, Hazel. Please forgive me. You wouldn't want me to get arrested, right? Unfortunately for him. After the accident and the temporary memory loss, the brainwashing had been completely undone. I calmly told Kyle like sadly, I no longer have any feelings for you. In fact, I genuinely hope you get arrested. Reflect on your actions while serving your time. Also, let's get divorced. And yes, I'll be asking for compensation. Kyle crumpled to the ground, murmuring like no way. He was sobbing so intensely it was hard to believe a grown man could cry that much. My mother-in-law, even at this point, yelled like, "Who do you think allowed you to live in our house all this time, you ungrateful woman?" But in reality, it was me who had been feeding them with my salary. "You've been living off my paycheck all this time, haven't you? I cooked, did laundry, cleaned, everything. I won't be fooled anymore. Maybe, before you scold me, you should think about how you're gonna survive from now on." With that, it seemed reality finally hit my mother-in-law. She stammered. Words escaped her as she broke down. Soon after, the police arrived due to my call and took Kyle away. During the investigation, he apparently admitted to his crime without any resistance. A few weeks after my discharge from the hospital, I immediately visited a law firm. I successfully divorced Kyle and managed to get a lump sum as compensation for the harm. I was advised to change both my workplace and residence for safety, so I got a new job at an accounting firm run by a colleague of Mr. Johnson. My mother and I moved near this new workplace. I never dreamed I'd be caught up with such a weird man and be brainwashed, but it's an experience nonetheless. I vowed to be strong and not let anyone manipulate me like that again, to truly live my life for myself. While Walter adored Sophia, he always berated me and treated me roughly. During Thanksgiving, I took Sophia back to my parents' home, and while we were having dinner, I got a call from Walter. Expecting it to be some pointless conversation, I put it on speakerphone so my mother could hear. Then, Walter's cheerful voice came through. "You don't need to come back." "What?" "I've brought Sophia's moving boxes to the house." I was completely baffled by what he was saying. "It's because of you that Sophia doesn't want to come home. If you just leave, Sophia can live freely with me like she did when she was a child. So, get out already." I was beyond angry and just astounded. "You can live in a shelter alone." "All right," I replied quietly and hung up. Suddenly, my mother and Sophia burst out laughing. Inside, I cursed at Walter. He better be ready. It's gonna be too late to apologize later. My name is Michelle and I'm a 55-year-old housewife. Walter was a senior in college, and after graduation, we met through a mutual friend and started dating. 2 years after our marriage, when I became pregnant, he was overjoyed. After our child was born, he actively took part in raising her. I often hear stories about fathers who are not involved in child rearing, but Walter was surprisingly involved in taking care of our daughter, Sophia. Many of my friends were envious. On the other hand, after giving birth to Sophia, he treated me as if I were disposable. It seemed like Walter had this rule: the more you adore your daughter, the more you can belittle your wife. He didn't hesitate to verbally abuse me, even in front of Sophia. Come to think of it, when we were dating, Walter seemed to look down on me, who was 3 years younger. Since we were from the same school, he didn't mock my education but made fun of my age. "Michelle, you're so cute, not knowing such things." "I'm sorry." "It's okay. I've lived 3 years longer than you, so I have more life experience. You won't go wrong if you listen to me." "Yes." Back when we were newlyweds, he spoke more kindly. However, as time went by, he became more and more arrogant. "Hey, many wives balance work and household chores. I'm taking care of Sophia. and you only have a part-time job for 6 hours. You should be able to handle it better, right? After attending a daycare committee meeting after work and having only bought a single ready-made dish due to being in a hurry, he said all that. When I mistakenly scheduled the neighborhood cleanup a week off, he nagged at me for an hour. Get it together. I'm embarrassed when you're like this. Sophia will also be talked about. Do you intend to put Sophia through hardship being her mother? I'm sorry. But Walter also read the neighborhood notice in front of me. Before I could mark the date on the calendar, he passed it to our neighbor. When I asked him which day it was, he answered confidently, so I assumed that was the cleanup day. It wasn't only my mistake. But if I pointed that out, he'd berate me tenfold. To end the argument quickly, it was best to show a humble attitude and bear it. Whenever I fell sick, Walter got upset. Before marriage, when I told him that I wasn't in the best of health, he said such sweet words. I'm robust, so if you ever get sick, I'll take care of you. But when I did feel unwell, Walter would incessantly complain in front of me, while I lay weak in bed. I can't make dinner because I have a fever of 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit? Can't take care of your husband? You're failing as a housewife. I'm sorry, I think I caught something from a colleague. Can you please get some takeout or something from the store? Oh sure, always with the excuses. Sophia, let's go get some dinner with Daddy. When Walter returned home, he only bought alcohol and snacks for himself and treats for Sophia, not getting anything suitable for me to eat. If you get us sick, you're in trouble. Right now, you're no different than a germ. Stay in your room until you're better. He snapped at me. As Walter closed the bedroom door, I could hear Sophia's concerned voice. Daddy, what about Mom's food? She'll manage on her own. We shouldn't get sick, so let's stay downstairs. Reluctantly, I was making soup in the kitchen late at night when Walter found me and yelled at me. What's this? You look fine. Don't fake it just because you want a break. I clearly look pale, can't you see? You catch a cold or the flu because you're not strong-willed enough. Look at me, I go to work even when I have a hangover. Seeing Walter puffing out his chest, I just lost the will to argue. Walter was always cold to me, but doted on Sophia. If she coughed even slightly, he'd panic, thinking, pneumonia? If she got hurt at the daycare, he'd overreact, demanding, who did this to her? When she had a boyfriend, Walter would sneakily find out where he lived and stake out, eventually telling Sophia. That guy has a childhood friend who's a girl. You should break up. This got him scolded by Sophia. So, when Sophia brought her boyfriend, Kevin, to our home, I was worried Walter might chase him away. But Kevin was the spitting image of a gentleman, so Walter had to accept him. You're way out, please take care of Sophia. Walter, sobbing and bowing his head, left Kevin looking surprised. Naturally, at their wedding, Walter cried like it was the end of the world, much to the amusement of our relatives. While such antics were endearing, Walter's behavior began to spiral out of control. Hey Sophia, why won't you live with us? Soon after she got married, every time Sophia visited, Walter would ask her. I knew the reason. Easygoing me and the meticulous Sophia had different personalities. Sophia realized this during her teenage rebellious phase, went to an out-of-state university, and started living alone after getting a job. With distance, she seemed to want to go out or chat, inviting me for shopping, movies, day trips, and even occasional cafe visits. This kind of distance felt just right. But Walter treated Sophia, now 30, like a child and kept pestering her about living together. If you're living in the next town, why not just live with us? I'm fine, I have Kevin with me. You're cold. I might get sick from loneliness. What are you saying? You're sturdy enough not to catch a cold. Initially, Sophia entertained Walter's whims, but he became too nagging, so she reduced her visits to just Christmas and Easter. Now, he'd send her messages every day, and if she didn't reply, he'd call to remind her. Ignoring that as well, one day Walter just waltzed into her house. When Sophia and Kevin returned, they found Walter lounging in their living room, which shocked them. Apparently, Walter secretly took their spare key and made a copy. After getting a call from Sophia, I rushed over to retrieve Walter. When I entered, Sophia was yelling at Walter.
"Dad, enough is enough. This is our home."
What's wrong with a father visiting his daughter's house? Walter, what are you doing? You can't just break into someone's home. It's natural for a father to care for his daughter. I've changed Sophia's diapers, bathed her, played with her at the park. You don't care about her like I do. I love my daughter and worry about her every day. I gave up trying to reason with Walter and forcefully took him home. Though he complied that day, Walter kept on with his antics, getting Kevin, a non-drinker, drunk at bars, dragging him to horse races and boat races, and making him spend unnecessarily. No matter how many times I cautioned Walter, he wouldn't listen and seemed ready to dig in his heels, so I stopped pushing. Right around that time, the summer holidays were approaching, and given it was the first one since my father's passing, I planned to take some days off work and visit home. When I mentioned this to Sophia, she said she wanted to go too. I'd like to visit the grave too. Okay, I'll let Grandma know. She'll be thrilled. My mother, now in her 80s, seemed a bit down ever since my father passed away. Even though my younger brother who lives nearby checks in on her, I'd like to visit during the holidays, chat with her, and help out with household chores. When I told Walter about this, as expected, he complained. You're gonna be away for 3 days, even though you're a wife? We're also going to visit your parents' grave. It's not about that. Leaving me alone for that long is just not right. Since his parents had already passed away, we usually visit their grave first. I believe I'm fulfilling my duties as a daughter-in-law. I'll leave money for 3 days' worth of meals on the table. Typical. Ditching your kitchen duties? Make sure to catch up on cleaning, laundry, and dishes when you get back. I'll leave my stuff out just to ensure you have something to do. I was tempted to retort, why don't you clean up after yourself for once, but swallowed my words and got in the car. As soon as we left, Sophia vented her frustration. Why is he so arrogant? Mom, are you okay being treated that way? I've just gotten used to tuning him out. Seeing my half-smiling face, Sophia looked displeased. But she quickly changed the subject, probably out of concern for me. Oh, speaking of which, about the new apartment we're moving into. You were living in the place that Kevin had since his bachelor days, right? And now it's gotten too cramped? With both Ethan and me working from home more, we felt the need for a home office. We just signed the lease recently and are now packing. That's great to hear. The new apartment is in the downtown area. I anticipated Walter making a fuss about it when he found out. That evening, my mother, Sophia, and I made meatloaf together. In the middle of our meal, Walter called. He typically complained over the phone whenever I visited my family. I assumed this call would be about some trivial matter like wanting a different beer or finding a hair in the hallway. Thinking to share the conversation with my mother, I put the call on speaker. Walter's cheerful voice echoed. Having a good time over there? Pretty much. What do you want? You don't need to come back. What? I've brought over Sophia and Ethan's moving boxes. There's no space for you anymore. I was at a complete loss for words. I glanced over at Sophia, who looked just as perplexed as I did. Walter, sounding triumphant, continued. With you around, Sophia won't come home. If you leave, she can live freely like when she was a child. So, just go. Well, I'm already living quite freely with Kevin. Sophia protested from beside me, but it seemed Walter wasn't listening. You can live alone in a facility. I was more flabbergasted than angry at Walter's smug remark. Understood. I replied calmly and hung up the phone. Immediately after, my mother and Sophia, sitting next to me at the dinner table, burst out laughing. They couldn't contain themselves, laughing so hard they held their stomachs. Walter, as always, never listens to anyone. Talk about being in his own world. This is crazy, Grandma, Sophia said, wiping tears from the corners of her eyes. I was too upset to laugh. In my heart, I was cursing Walter. I had turned a blind eye to his antics because he was fond of Sophia, but this was the last straw. He better brace himself. An apology later won't cut it. After the call, I quickly finished my meal. I then arranged for a moving company and made another important call. As time passed, Sophia seemed to become angrier. As she washed dishes, she vented.
No matter if he's the father, entering someone's house and moving their belongings without permission is utterly ridiculous. Unforgivable.
We can confront him together, but let him speak his mind for a while. I want to record everything. Got it. On the way home with Sophia, we stopped by a divorce attorney's office. The moment we opened the front door, boxes that couldn't fit in the living room spilled out into the hallway. Sophia's belongings. He really brought them here. Walter appeared with a grin for Sophia and then glared at me.
Sophia, welcome back.
Why did you come back? Don't worry. I just came to grab some valuables and a change of clothes. I'll be moving out within the week. You finally get it. When I placed the divorce attorney's business card on the dining table and urged Walter to sign, he remarked with a smirk.
I should have done this sooner. I kept you around thinking you'd be a good housekeeper since you're Sophia's mother. But I realized I can just make Sophia do all the chores.
The one who had been putting up with everything was me. I ignored him and started transferring my valuables into my bag. Hey, are you sure about this? Sure about what? You're being stubborn. You don't have anywhere to go, right? I heard your brother and his wife are moving in with your mom next year. You'll struggle living alone with your meager salary. Walter spoke to my back with arrogance as I packed my suitcase. If you change your mind now and apologize for everything and swear to serve me for the rest of your life, I might let you stay in this house. Thanks for the offer, but I'm good. I had already booked a place, and I'm just moving there a bit earlier.
Oh, some rundown apartment? That would suit you better than this stylish room. Don't you think so, Sophia?
Walter laughed crudely. Sophia, who had been frowning all this while, finally spoke. You're seriously mistaken, aren't you? Wait, Sophia. Enough already. Dad, you seem to be under the impression that I dislike Mom. I need to set things straight. Walter's eyes widened in surprise. Comparing me and Sophia, a small smirk formed on Walter's lips. You're too late. I know everything about Sophia. How you found your mother annoying, how you chose a college with dorms because you didn't want to see her. But when you started working and living alone, you missed your dad and sometimes came home, right? Sophia, wrapping her arms around herself and grimacing, retorted. Ew, are you serious? What? Walter's eyes widened in surprise. The one I found annoying was you, Dad. I left home because I couldn't stand seeing you verbally abuse Mom and watching her silently endure it. I also hated that I couldn't stop it. I looked at Sophia, shocked. Sophia. Sure, during my rebellious phase, I might have been cold to Mom. But have you ever heard me say anything bad about her? I bet you haven't. Seemingly hitting a nerve, Walter's face contorted in discomfort. If you'd treated Mom better, I would have commuted from home to college. The cold treatment I received from Sophia during her rebellious teenage years no longer bothered me. However, I always believed Sophia left home to avoid our disagreements. I never thought that Sophia hated me, but I did believe she didn't want to live with me. Discovering this unexpected truth made my heart heavy with emotion. Also, you think I don't know, huh? About the debt you made from gambling. Walter's cheeks tensed up.
What are you talking about?
Feigning ignorance, Walter's face turned pale, his voice shaking. Don't play dumb. You used my college tuition for horse racing and boat racing, didn't you? Mom had to borrow money from Grandma to pay it off, right?
Michelle! You spilled the beans!
Walter shouted at me. No, I overheard you talking to Grandma in the hallway when you returned the money to her. I later asked Grandma about it. I had asked Mom to keep that a secret.
I didn't know she told Sophia about it.
Sophia glared at Walter and smirked. To you, gambling was more important than my college, huh? Sure, you were affectionate, but that's just how much you cared, right? Walter mumbled.
That's not true. You and gambling both were equally important to me. Proof is, I took you to the racetracks, right? If gambling was more important, I wouldn't have spent time with you.
What's with that excuse? Another thing, Sophia. You seem to think that I treated your mother poorly, but that's not the case. Walter said emphatically. I was just trying to teach her where she was lacking. Telling her to be more ladylike, more motherly, to be a good wife to her husband. I was just disciplining her to correct those things. What's wrong with that? Sophia closed her eyes, rubbing her forehead, clearly exasperated. Mind your own business. Who do you think you are, acting so high and mighty? I'm grateful that you played with me when I was a child. But you were always bad-mouthing Mom in front of me. I really hated it. Releasing years of pent-up frustration, Sophia vented. While demanding 3 dishes for dinner and a spotless house, you'd leave your clothes everywhere and wouldn't even make your own coffee. Thanks to you, I grew up distrusting men and struggled with the idea of marriage. Walter seemed not to have heard Sophia's passionate plea. He let out a soft sigh and furrowed his brows. Seems like you've got the wrong idea, Sophia. Well, if we live together, you'll understand. What? I'm definitely not living with you. I'll move my stuff to my new place tomorrow. You've always been stubborn, huh? Or is it playing hard to get? I know deep down you really love me. You're just shy, aren't you, Sophia? Chuckling, Walter took the divorce attorney's business card. We're gonna be total strangers soon. Move out quickly. Don't leave your stuff here too long, it's a hassle.
I will. So, you better find a new place too. If you dilly-dally, you'll get kicked out.
What? Walter looked dumbfounded. I shot him a cold, sarcastic smile.
Did you forget? This apartment used to belong to my father.
It seemed the realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Seeing Walter's wide-eyed expression, I kindly reminded him. Remember when we were considering buying a house after getting married? Dad suggested we live here since a unit became available. Plus, it's close to your work. After Dad passed away last year, Mom inherited it. So, it's hers now. Walter went pale, rapidly recalling the phone conversation he had had earlier. I smiled gently and continued.
Mom was listening to our call earlier. She said she wouldn't tolerate someone so ungrateful and inconsiderate. So, move out ASAP. Despite its age, the apartment is renovated and is quite a catch. Can't have you squatting here forever.
But, if you're telling me all of a sudden. Desperately, Walter stammered. I thought my rent was being auto-debited from my account.
Seriously? Don't you check your statements? And with your salary, there's no way you could afford the $1,000 rent. In that case, where are you planning to move? Without this place, you've got nowhere to go. And I won't let you live with Sophia.
His face red with rage, Walter shouted, but Sophia shot him a cold, icy glare. For your information, I don't waste money on booze, cigarettes, or gambling like someone I know. I've been saving up from my part-time job, and I've booked a spot at a luxury retirement home. Apparently, there's a vacancy right now, so I'm moving there.
It's in a hot spring town, right? With an open-air bath? And you can see the ocean from the living room?
Excitedly, Sophia chimed in. I smiled. Exactly, the view is amazing. There's even a personal garden, so I can do some gardening.
That sounds fun. I'll come visit.
Please do. So, Walter, maybe you should find a place you like?
I don't have that kind of money.
His voice dropping, Walter admitted. But I sharply retorted. Figured as much. But I'll still be asking for alimony, so be ready to pay up.
Alimony? I never cheated or anything.
I've endured 32 years of your verbal abuse. You'll pay for every bit of it. Even if you have to take on debt, I expect you to pay up." "No way." "Oh, I got it. We don't have to get divorced." Suddenly hopeful, Walter exclaimed, "Let's forget about this whole thing." "What?"
"You can stay in this apartment. We'll put the divorce on hold. That way, you won't have to leave, and I won't have to go, right?"
Glowing with what he thought was a brilliant solution, Walter was immediately shut down by Sophia's curt reply. "Are you for real?" Ignoring the stunned Walter, Sophia called out to me.
"Mom, once you're ready, let's head back to Grandma's house. We can leave the rest to the movers."
"Yeah, we've got a reservation at the sushi place for everyone tomorrow." Leaving a dazed Walter behind, Sophia and I went back to our family home.
"I won't accept this divorce. I'll live here forever."
Though Walter was adamant about staying in the apartment, after being persuaded by the property management that an eviction would be costly, he reluctantly moved to a small rental apartment. Later, when he resisted the divorce, we hired a lawyer for discussions. Presenting recordings of Walter's past verbal abuses as evidence and informing him about the legal fees if it goes to court, he finally agreed to our terms. I didn't trust Walter, so I billed him all at once for the $10,000 in damages and the college tuition my mother had covered for him. After taking out loans to pay me back, Walter moved into a rundown apartment. After I shared the story of our divorce with colleagues, exaggerated rumors spread like wildfire, making it uncomfortable for Walter at work. Close to retirement, he resigned from his company and began working part-time jobs. Turns out, Walter had secretly racked up debt from gambling. It seems his severance pay went towards repaying the money he owed me and settling his gambling debts. He was denied re-employment and continuously failed his full-time job interviews. The vices he loved, alcohol, cigarettes, and gambling, became unaffordable. Working multiple part-time jobs from dawn till dusk, a mutual acquaintance told me. Sophia, who had initially planned to move into the apartment with Kevin, was bombarded with frequent calls from Walter and eventually blocked his number. But then, I started receiving daily messages and calls from Walter, asking about Sophia's well-being, so I blocked him too. As of now, I have no idea where Walter is or what he's up to. I've since quit my job and moved to a high-end retirement home, enjoying my days at a leisurely pace. Whether it's sipping tea on my balcony overlooking the sea, taking in the night sky from the outdoor tub, or tending to flowers in my private rooftop garden, time seems to pass so slowly here. It was an odd feeling at first, but I reminded myself this was my reward for years of juggling work and raising a child. No more living in fear of my husband's verbal abuse, even the air tastes sweeter. Sophia and Kevin live about an hour's drive from here, and I always look forward to their visits. Sophia did offer for me to move in with them, but I felt it best to maintain some distance for now. Recently, Sophia shared the news that she's expecting a baby, which filled me with joy. Looking ahead, I hope Sophia and I can continue to respect each other's lives, keep unnecessary meddling at bay, and maintain our close bond. A housewife who doesn't cook ends up divorced, you know. Tom punched my belly lightly. I didn't think he used much force. But that was where my precious baby is.
"Hey! Stop it!"
Surprised by Tom's unexpected action, I reacted excessively. Tom, seeing me like that, chuckled.
"If you don't like it, hurry up and make lunch. Look, even the baby is saying it. Poor dad's starving because of mom." "Fine. I got it, so stop. Just not my belly. Don't hit my belly."
I screamed in a voice resembling a scream, and Tom finally stopped. I'm tired. Just do as you're told from the beginning. Hurry up and make it. Dash, like a sprinter. Tom said that, looking satisfied. Then he froze as he looked at the computer screen in front of him. Huh? I somehow got off the chair, distanced myself from Tom, and said while restraining him with scissors nearby.
"This time, I won't let you make excuses." "Well, there shouldn't be a need for that."
This is a lie, right? With this, I won't let him escape. This time, I'll expose his true nature. I am Hannah, 29 years old. I work for an electrical appliance manufacturer, but I'm currently on maternity leave, so I'm pretty much like a housewife. The reason for saying pretty much is because there's a reason. Doing some odd jobs and irregular remote meetings. I'm allowed to participate in those. That's because, due to my pregnancy, I entrusted the project I was involved in to my junior. I asked to participate to understand the flow of things. However, I rarely speak and am more of a bystander. Even so, I was happy to be able to participate and know the progress of the project. Seriously, that's just labor. It's a waste of time, and it's annoying. Stop it. Complaining in this dissatisfied tone is my husband, Tom. He's 36 years old, 7 years older than me. He was originally my boss at work. Tom, who was good at his job, was always relied upon by those around him. I was gradually drawn to him by his kind guidance. Getting married to Tom was fortunate, and people around us envy us, but he changed after marriage. Don't say that. Even if you call it work, I'm just doing odd jobs and attending meetings, right? Sometimes, I'm just observing. That's a waste. How about cleaning the room if you have that much time? I saw dust accumulating under the furniture recently. Tom pointed to the TV rack and the floor gap. It was a place I couldn't clean without bending down. I'm in the last month of pregnancy, and with this belly, it's impossible to bend down. So, it's true that I've been neglecting cleaning in that area. I'm doing what I can for now, but I'm sorry. In a situation like this, normally the wife's parents would come to help with household chores. But you don't have that. Ken said with a sigh. My chest hurt. My parents passed away in an accident 10 years ago. It's been 10 years already, but it still feels like 10 years ago. Yet, Tom casually makes fun of me for not having parents like I do now. And I always had to apologize. I'm sorry. I'm causing trouble. Then, Tom would always smile satisfied.
You're lucky. Being able to marry a generous guy like me. I never thought I'd marry an ordinary woman like Hannah, with no special qualities.
This is how Tom satisfies his ego. Every day is a barrage of sarcasm or bragging. He wasn't like this before we got married. Is it inevitable for people to change after marriage, regardless of gender? Furthermore, it's unfortunate that Tom has such a great facade that nobody believes me, no matter who I complain to. I get off-target responses like, "You're just being spoiled." Or, "It's good to be reliable." As everyone says, I could endure this much and just let it go. But recently, I've been troubled by Tom coming home after work. From the evening to the night, when the sound of trying to unlock the door, it's the signal of him coming home. Even if I was in the middle of doing some housework, when he comes home, I'd rush to the front door. And as I look at the opening door, I pray. I hope Tom is in a good mood today. When he's in a good mood, I only receive reports like,
"The company did well."
or,
"I secured a contract."
The problem is when he's in a bad mood.
So annoying. Acting all high and mighty like it's a business deal. That outdated guy.
The moment he enters the door, Tom stomps his feet, making a loud noise. Welcome home. He tosses his bag towards me and heads to the bath, clicking his tongue. I was really scared of this whole sequence of actions. I considered divorce when this continued for several days. I first consulted with a colleague, but he didn't believe me. Tom? That's impossible. You're exaggerating. Look, you're pregnant and maybe tired, right? How about taking a break for a change of pace? The response was as if he was implying that I was the one being strange. It's sad, but I understand my colleague's feelings. Tom, when we worked together, was perfect in everyone's eyes. Always smiling, gentle, and calm. I don't think even my past self would believe that he could transform like this. Maybe it's just a passing phase. Perhaps he's becoming irritable because he's busy and tired. I decided to think positively. It's not like he's hitting me or anything. When he throws things or shouts, my body flinches, but he has never physically harmed me. Someday, he'll return to being the kind person he used to be. I hoped and prayed for that. No one would believe that Tom has changed. But except for one person. That's my Uncle Bob. My grandparents live far away, and my parents passed away. After the accident, I was left alone, but I had one reliable relative. That's my Uncle Bob, my father's younger brother. Because he moved to the city before my father did, he happened to live near our family by chance. Honestly, Bob looks scary. He's 6 feet 3 inches tall and has a good physique, so just standing there, he exudes an intimidating presence. However, he's incredibly kind and a wonderful person on the inside. When I was young, instead of my busy parents, Uncle Bob would often play with me. Back then, I thought of Bob as unemployed. That's how much he kept me company. I think he cared for me like a real daughter. You know, I was the first one to hold Hannah in my arms. He often joked like that and bantered with my father. So, after my parents passed away, it was indeed Bob who supported me. In my days, Bob took care of most of the procedures for me. When I didn't even feel like eating, he would make light meals like oats porridge or soup. I remember that I couldn't really say it was delicious, but I inadvertently put it in my mouth. After my parents' accident and my subsequent dropping out of college, Bob was the one who introduced me to a job. When I hesitated, feeling sorry for using connections, Bob said gently, "Don't get it wrong. It's just an introduction. It's up to Hannah how you work from here on out." I don't know. Unable to repay my parents, I want to repay Bob. That was my goal. I had put up with a life with Tom, who just spewed abusive language. But one day, Tom finally raised his hand against me. At first, it might not have been intentional. Tom was in a worse mood than usual that day, and I knew I had to be careful. But I was also not feeling well and didn't have the patience. So, I inadvertently muttered to the point against Tom, who would pick on everything. "Oh, shut up." The moment I said that, I knew the room had frozen. I messed up. I needed to apologize quickly. I immediately apologized, but it was too late. A magazine flew right by my face. Tom had thrown it in anger.
Hey! What did you just say? Did you call me noisy when I came home tired? Hey!
From there, it was useless to say anything. Tom kept throwing things one after another. Fortunately, he had rational, even though seeming crazy. Everything he threw was light or thin. Maybe because he had done it once, the threshold had become lower. From that day on, Tom, though weak, would raise his hand at me over trivial things. Scared, I thought of consulting Bob. Actually, Bob worked at the same company as us. He had introduced me to this company because he could be flexible with various things in the company. Tom hadn't said anything about Bob, so he probably didn't know they worked at the same company. But I had introduced him once, so he recognized Bob as my family. I was sure Bob would believe me. I had that kind of conviction. But, unfortunately, Bob was on a business trip abroad at that moment. Worried about me, Bob offered to listen to me over the phone if that was okay. For a moment, I thought I should lean on him, but Bob is that Bob. If he knew my current situation, he might rush over. That wouldn't be fair to the company and Bob. Helplessly, I decided to wait for Bob to come home. By the way, I also consulted my colleague and friends, but nobody believed me. Moreover, somehow, the fact that I was talking about Tom reached Tom himself. Tom apparently laughed sadly, was like, "I intended it as a form of physical closeness." Everyone completely believed this excuse. Thanks to that, I ended up being treated as just an overly self-conscious wife. One day, as I was working in my room as usual, Tom came by. It was unusual, Tom's day for remote work too. I knew this in advance. "I'm hungry. What about lunch?" Tom said, almost tossing it out there. "Oh, just wait a moment. I'm working." Tom let out an irritated sigh. From that tone, I immediately understood. He's coming. The usual one. I instantly tensed up and prepared myself mentally. Usually, it's either the arm or the leg. And Tom approached me with a nasty grin on his face. A housewife who doesn't cook ends up divorced, you know. Tom punched my belly lightly. I didn't think he used much force, but that's where my precious baby is.
Stop it, please!
Shocked by Tom's unexpected actions, I reacted excessively. Up until now, he never went for my belly, no matter what. I curled up on the chair, trying to protect my belly with my own arms. Tears welled up from fear and anxiety. Seeing me like that, Tom laughed in amusement.
If you don't like it, then make lunch already. Come on, even the baby is saying it. Dad's hungry because of Mom. Ouch! Please! Please, just don't hit my belly.
Why would he do something so cruel? I'm his wife, and the one inside my belly is our child. I couldn't comprehend it at all. I don't want to do this thing. But, you know, it can't be helped. You don't make lunch. Dad's pitiful, huh? While speaking like that, Tom's hand didn't stop. He persistently hit my belly over and over. I couldn't resist much because I was seated in a chair, making it difficult. All I could do was defend myself as best as I could.
Okay. I get it. Please stop. Just don't hit my belly.
Screaming in a voice similar to a cry, Tom finally stopped his hands.
I'm tired. It would have been fine if you just did as I told you from the beginning. Hurry up and make it. Dash over.
Saying that, Tom lifted his face, looking satisfied. And then, he froze as he looked at the computer screen in front of him. I somehow got off the chair, distanced myself from Tom, and said while restraining him with the scissors that were nearby.
I won't let you make excuses this time. Well, there shouldn't be a need for that.
This is a lie, right? Answering Tom, who was all pale and flustered, was a person on the other side of the computer screen. I want to believe it's a lie too. I never thought you'd be such a despicable person. The one holding his head in his hands on the screen was the department head. Several other employees were looking at us with disgusted expressions.
No, it's not like that. I didn't hear anything. Yeah. I was set up. I was tricked.
Tom clung to the computer, almost groveling to the department head. You have a bad reputation. Didn't I tell you? I said I was in the middle of work, so wait. I didn't lie or deceive anyone.
If that's the case, then say you're in a remote meeting properly. If you did that, then
Tom started to say, then stopped himself, his face pale with realization. He was about to say, if you did that, then I wouldn't have hit you. He's a guy who cares a lot about appearances and what others think. Tom, a sly and cunning man, he wouldn't even rouse his hands against another person's or utter foul language at work. That's why nobody would believe me even if I complained. I felt a sense of despair at that time. However, after some thought, I realized something. If they wouldn't believe me, I needed evidence. Since I found out that Tom had a remote meeting today, I had secretly planned to expose his true nature. I just didn't expect him to attack my belly. It was my fault for being careless. Anyway, everyone at work is witnesses, so there's no escaping this now. Let's get a divorce. I don't want to see your face anymore.
No way! Hannah, without you,
As Tom uttered these pitiful words, someone started knocking at the entrance. As I was about to go, Tom stood in my way, trying to obstruct me.
Wait! We're in the middle of a conversation.
Is it okay to raise your voice like that? The computer is still connected. Oh. I quickly slipped past the distracted Tom and rushed to the entrance. However, I was caught before I could get far, and my arm was grabbed by him.
Stop! Let me out!
This place is out of sight from the computer, just perfect. Hey, let's come up with an excuse together. Should we make it a prank? That's the safest bet. It's more credible if you say it, so tell everyone.
No, I won't. I don't want to gauge your mood anymore, be treated like a slave, and be dominated by fear.
Someone, help! I screamed in my mind. At that moment, I heard a rattling sound from the entrance, and the door swung open vigorously as someone entered from outside. Seeing the person's face, I collapsed on the spot in relief.
Are you okay, Hannah?
It was my Uncle Bob, who apparently secretly joined that meeting. He had watched the video and rushed to our house immediately. Luckily, the front door was left unlocked.
Does it hurt anywhere? How about your belly?
Bob rushed to my side, pulling me away from Tom. And then Bob shielded me with his back. Thanks to Bob's broad back, I couldn't see Tom. Most likely, Tom couldn't see me either. Hi, Bob. You're Hannah's uncle, aren't you? Long time no see. As I secretly glanced from behind Bob, the cunning Tom offered a forced smile. Bob, straightening his posture, looked down at Tom. Bob is taller, making Tom appear very small and delicate.
Hannah, can you stand? You should rest on the sofa over there.
Ignoring the Tom, Bob moved me to the sofa while supporting me. Sitting down brought some relief. Tom tried to approach me, but Bob stopped him with grim face.
Rest for a bit, then let's go to the hospital just in case. That's too much. It was just a little shove. It's part of our intimacy as a couple.
How could he perceive it that way? Just stay quiet. Once we confirm Hannah and the baby are okay, we can talk. Don't worry, the meeting was recorded, so you can relax. You were watching that? So, we are in the same company. Tom clicked his tongue in frustration and fell silent. Really, what a terrible man you married, Hannah. Seeing Bob sigh with a stern expression, I felt somewhat apologetic and couldn't say anything. I went to the hospital and confirmed that there were no problems with the baby in my belly. I felt relieved, and my whole body relaxed. With that, Bob and I, along with Tom, headed to the company. Bob was like,
think yourself and the baby first. Leave the rest to me.
But in the first place, this is a matter between Tom and me. Even if it's Bob, I can't leave everything to him. There could have been a different day to address this, but it's about Tom. The more time we give, the more he might come up with something. I'm already in the last month of pregnancy, and I don't know when labor pains might come. It's best to settle this quickly now. I am a mother. I have a duty to ensure that this baby can be born with peace of mind. When we arrived at the company, we were immediately led to a separate room. It seemed Bob had made the arrangements. There must have been testimony from the employees present at the meeting. In the spacious conference room, the meeting members, Tom and I, and Bob were gathered. Bob handed me my bag, and I took out a piece of paper from inside. It was with a contact number of lawyer who assists divorce. I had prepared for it a long time ago and kept it in my bag. Tom's face contorted for a moment, but then he smiled uncomfortably. I also have some blame for things being misunderstood. I'll accept the divorce. I don't really care about the division of property. I'll pay child support too. Perhaps because we were in front of everyone, he was strangely understanding. With Tom's acceptance, the conversation proceeded smoothly. However, when we reached a certain point, Tom froze. Quit the company or be transferred? Yes. I plan to return after my maternity leave and childcare leave. It wouldn't be good for both of us if you were still here, right? So, I really want you to quit. Tom looked at me seriously and nodded. I see. But what about the company's perspective? What are you trying to say? I don't mean to brag, but I think I'm a valuable asset to the company. I have good performance. No problems with relationships. And I have a good reputation with our business partners too. Indeed, Tom, with his pleasant demeanor, was considered the ace of the company. A so-called immediate contributor. If things continued this way, it was said that he would undoubtedly become an executive in the future. On the other hand, Hannah is, for better or worse, an average female employee you can find anywhere. Oh, I'm not belittling you. Just stating the facts. I understand. Furthermore, if you're a single mother with a small child, you'll inevitably have more time off in the future, right? You'll surely become a burden to the company and your colleagues. I had thought about this when I became pregnant. I don't have parents to rely on. If something happens, I have to figure it out myself. That's unavoidable, but for the company, I might honestly be a troublesome employee. I understood what Tom was trying to say, even if I didn't like it. He was implying that the company would choose him, an ace and valuable person, who brought complicated risks even though he caused the problem this time, over me.
See? So, the best thing is to let this incident go and get along again. It's the best for the baby too. I don't want that.
Tom looked bewildered.
Tolerate and accept it again?
Are you kidding me? That won't change anything.
Do you want me to endure the hellish days of being constantly insulted again?
The employees whispered among themselves, looking at Tom with puzzled expressions. Especially the female employees were giving him cold glares as if he were a bug. Because we're a couple, we've had our disagreements. But it should be mutual.
Is that mutual? The ratio is way off, don't you think? I was always the one being pushed around.
As I retorted, Tom seemed unable to hide his agitation. You're like a completely different person. What happened to you, Hannah?
Well, until now, I've been patient. I had hoped that you might change someday. But I never thought you'd lay a hand on our baby.
The surroundings' gazes became sharp in an instant. Tom chuckled sheepishly. Sweat trickled down his forehead.
Hannah, that's why.
Going back to the conversation, let's leave the decision of who will quit to the company.
Is that okay?
Tom responded energetically. I wonder he was confident that if it's in the case he would be the one chosen.
Well then, we'll proceed with the divorce right away. Thanks for your efforts. Starting now, you and I are strangers.
Hang on, Hannah.
Goodbye.
I wanted to get away from this person as soon as possible. With my Uncle Bob accompanying me, I went to consult with the lawyer for divorce process. By the way, the Tom seemed to have some strange confidence, but his resignation was certain. It's a bit underhanded, but Bob is our president, in other words, the head of the company. Since the president is on my side, I already know the outcome. It feels a bit unfair, though. Muttering that, Bob furrowed his brows with a stern expression.
What? The one at fault is that guy. He doesn't even remember the face of the company's president, let alone act like he's some valuable talent. So arrogant.
I vented a bit to Bob. His face turned red with anger. Thanks to talking a lot, I felt refreshed. So, on the way back to home, we had a conversation eagerly anticipating the birth of my baby. I have no more worries. I can give birth in peace now. A few days later, I gave birth safely. It was a cute girl. Bob came to the hospital, tearing up like it was his own grandchild. I received a message from Tom saying, I want to meet her. Did this person forget what he did before my baby was born? I replied like, I can't meet you, it's too dangerous. I want to cut ties with him, but I don't want to risk him getting angry, so I've made the messaging app a way to communicate. By the way, I receive daily updates on his situation. After being fired from the company, he got a job in the same industry. But, because it's the same industry, rumors about Tom are already circulating. He lamented like,
everyone is cold to me, and I can't even get a girlfriend.
According to his colleague, Tom lamented like,
I could never meet an amazing woman such a Hannah.
Well then, don't do things like that. Now I'm discussing with Bob about my baby's name. We're struggling to come up with a good name. And Bob is already smitten. He's so affectionate that he won't let my baby marry anyone. I couldn't show this grandchild to my parents, but I'm glad Bob is happy. Someday, when my baby learns to speak, I want to make Bob be called her grandpa. Despite appearances, he'll probably burst into tears. I'm looking forward to it.
I gave the house to Mom. If you oppose, I'll divorce you.
Suddenly, those were the words I was hit with from Ryan.
I never heard about buying a house for your mother. Where did you get that kind of money anyway?
I asked, and Ryan just smirked.
I'm selling your dad's vacation home. That'll get us $400,000.
Selling my deceased father's beloved vacation home? How could he decide that on his own? I was furious. But then Ryan shouted either that or divorce. I felt my anger cooling down.
Fine, got it. I won't let you or your family insult mine anymore.
I muttered.
So you're saying divorce is the only option? You okay with that?
Ryan asked as if playing his trump card. But I firmly responded.
You'll regret it, you know? I won't.
With that, Ryan laughed loudly, looking all confident. However, just 2 months later, he would appear before me, looking like a shadow of his former self. My name is Catherine Miller, 50 years old. I got married at 45, and it felt like a miracle at the time. After all, I was quite plain-looking, not particularly outgoing, and generally unnoticeable. I met my husband Ryan at our workplace. I worked in the accounting department, and he had just transferred to the sales department. I had to visit the sales department due to an invoice error. Ryan Miller, who was 32 at the time, corrected the mistake without any fuss, saying, "Oops." He then looked at me and laughed innocently.
You're pretty kind, Miss Taylor. The other accountants scolded me pretty hard the other day.
My maiden name was Taylor. Seeing Ryan's friendly smile and his handsome face, I felt he was from a different world than mine. Yet for some reason, he became fond of me, a woman 10 years his senior, and started greeting me every time we crossed paths at the office. The first time he asked me out for drinks, I was surprised that a man would be interested in someone like me. As time passed, we got closer and started dating. Some said I was being fooled, but I was genuinely drawn to his carefree nature. About 2 years into our relationship, Ryan quit and joined a different company. When I asked why, he said, "My current boss is too strict. I want to work more freely." I felt it was a bit immature, but I was indulgent with him. "I hope you find a better boss at your next job," was all I said. And a few months later, we got married. I was 45, and Ryan was 35. I never thought I'd marry someone 10 years younger. My dad, overjoyed by the news of our marriage, offered to cover the entire wedding cost, leading to a grand ceremony. Although I felt a simple wedding would have sufficed at 45, he wouldn't listen. Ryan's mom was single at the time, having divorced his dad. It seemed she felt her role was done when Ryan got his first job, and my father-in-law was the one who initiated the divorce. I didn't know the reason back then, but I would come to understand it firsthand later. Because of these circumstances, we didn't expect any financial help from Ryan's side for the wedding. Once Ryan and I started living in our apartment, his mom, perhaps feeling lonely, began visiting us frequently. It wasn't a bother, but she would always bring expensive desserts with her.
Ryan, look, it's your favorite, right? I bought a bunch, so eat up.
My mother-in-law opened her own gift and placed it on the table, but as expected, nothing was set in front of me. Every time she visits, she'd beeline straight to Ryan and converse only with him. It's as if I don't even exist. The rare times she does look my way, she'd make snide remarks like, "I wonder why Ryan married such an older, unattractive woman like you," or "Oh, how gloomy this room is despite the sunny weather. Must be because you're here, Catherine." And most times she stays for dinner, she'd criticize every dish I serve.
What's this? Cheap-looking meat? Ryan's in his prime, you know? You should serve better quality meat.
Even if she says so, I can't afford to serve premium meat every day. Every time I place a dish on the table, she'd mumble about how cheap it looks, yet she'd devour everything and leave, which baffles me. Though single and unemployed, I always wondered how she could afford such luxury. One day, I was shocked when I updated a long-neglected bank book under Ryan's name. The balance was 0.
Ryan, what did you spend all this money on?
I confronted Ryan, but he just stared blankly at the bank book showing a zero balance. I remember his father had painstakingly saved a considerable sum, hundreds of thousands of dollars, for Ryan before their divorce. Yet, it was all gone in a few months.
I think Mom probably used it,
Ryan muttered.
What? Your mother? Why would she use your money without permission?
I exclaimed, and he just sighed deeply.
Well, maybe she's struggling for money since she's single. No way. Regardless, she spent way too much.
I protested, but Ryan suddenly glared at me.
Enough. Don't badmouth Mom. You really are a cold woman.
With that, he locked himself in his room. I was stunned by Ryan's sudden change. Later, I found out that one of the reasons his parents divorced was due to his mother's reckless spending. After that, I directly told my mother-in-law not to use our money and started monitoring her actions. She constantly complained, calling me a miserable and spiteful daughter-in-law, but if it meant our finances wouldn't be drained, I didn't care. Ryan wasn't pleased either, but if she kept spending like water, we'd soon be bankrupt. We both work, but we still have mortgage payments for our apartment. 2 years later, a new issue arose. Ryan was having an affair. He often came home late from work and lied about working weekends. Suspicious, I hired a detective agency and discovered Ryan's affair with a younger colleague. When I confronted him, instead of apologizing, he got defensive.
How dare you hire a detective? If you have that kind of money, you should have spent it on Mom. You're really the worst. That's not the point, Ryan. You had an affair. Admit it.
I pressed, and he just scoffed.
What if I did? I settled for a dull, unattractive woman like you. Can't blame me for straying once or twice. Once or twice. Are there others? Shut up. Keep this up, and I'm gonna divorce you. What divorce?
Seeing my shocked reaction, Ryan seemed to think he'd gained the upper hand. He smirked and stood up.
If you don't like it, then keep your mouth shut. But honestly, even if I stray, I'll always come back to you. You should be grateful.
With that, he left the room. Confronting Ryan about his affair, I couldn't get even a single word of apology. Instead, he seemed to mock me, and this broke my heart, making me cry for days. But when he mentioned divorce, I couldn't stand up to him. If I divorced, I'd be alone for the rest of my life. The only person who ever wanted to marry someone like me was Ryan. With that thought, I couldn't say anything about his actions anymore. 3 years went by, and I turned 50. That year, my father was diagnosed with colon cancer. By the time they found it, it was already advanced and in its final stages. My mother and I took turns staying by his bedside, caring for him. Though weakened, my father's gentle demeanor remained unchanged, and we were able to spend some peaceful moments together. However, being the CEO of a large corporation, business associates would visit him daily to pay their respects. Every time they did, it seemed to drain him even more. Strangely, during all this, Ryan visited frequently. Even though he had never been fond of visiting my parents since we got married, his sudden change of heart surprised me.
Please stay strong, sir. It'll break Catherine's heart if you don't. You need to live a long life, Ryan would say to him.
I sometimes couldn't believe my ears hearing these words from Ryan. But my father seemed to be thankful for him.
Thank you, Ryan, for marrying my shy daughter, Catherine. With a bright man like you by her side, I'm sure she's happy.
I had to bite my tongue hearing such words.
Do you think we can visit that vacation home this year?
My father would ask. My father owned a vacation home in Malibu. When I was single, our family of 3 used to visit frequently. But since my marriage, I stopped going because Ryan wasn't keen on spending time with my parents there. Apparently, my parents still visited annually.
Why don't I leave that house to you, Ryan? When I'm gone, can you take Catherine there every year?
Tears welled up in my father's eyes as he said this, but Ryan shook his head.
Please don't talk like that, sir. It's bad luck.
After a brief pause, Ryan continued.
I promise. If anything were to happen, I'll take good care of that property.
Looking straight into Ryan's eyes, my father nodded in gratitude. But just a few weeks later, my father passed away. While my mother and I were drowning in sorrow, Ryan suddenly dropped a bombshell.
I've given the house to Mom. If you oppose it, we're gonna divorce.
I was in shock.
I never heard anything about buying a house for your mother. Besides, where'd you get that kind of money?
With a smirk, Ryan replied.
I'm selling your father's vacation home. I'll get $400,000 from it.
I couldn't believe what Ryan was suggesting.
You promised to take care of that place. Even if I don't want to go there every year, what about my mother? That place means a lot to her.
But Ryan just chuckled.
I never said I was gonna keep that promise. Thanks to that, your father left me the house in his will. Now I can finally give Mom something nice. What kind of guy are you?
I felt my body trembling with anger. All this time, he would go on about mom, making himself out to be such a mama's boy. But now, I have to admit he's nothing more than a creepy mama's boy. But the next words out of Ryan's mouth made me doubt my own ears.
Mom's gonna get remarried. What? That's why I'm setting up a house for her and her new husband.
From what I gathered, his mother had made this request. The house they had been living in was old, and she didn't want to be reminded of memories with her late husband. So, she wanted to start fresh in a new home and had asked Ryan to help.
You must be kidding. Why do we have to provide a home for your mother and her new husband?
In near hysteria, I retorted. But Ryan was deaf to my objections.
That's what you call respecting your parents.
I felt my blood run cold.
All right, I get it. I won't tolerate any more insults from you or your family.
I muttered to myself.
Well then, looks like we got no choice but to divorce, huh? You okay with that?
Ryan said, playing what seemed like his trump card. But I firmly declared.
That's fine, but you'll regret it.
At my words, a surprised expression crossed Ryan's face for a moment. But he quickly reverted to his insolent grin.
Don't think so.
He laughed heartily.
Don't act so tough. It's not an act. I'm done being manipulated by you and your mother. The condo is in your name, so good luck with the remaining mortgage payments. I'm moving out,
I said, and within a few days, I packed up and left the condo. 2 months after our divorce was finalized. And thanks to the inheritance from my father, I had no issues relocating and settling into a new place. Although I rented, the apartment was spacious enough for one. Just as I was getting accustomed to my new surroundings, Ryan showed up at my door.
Catherine, I've been looking everywhere for you.
It had been a while since I saw Ryan, and he looked worn out, sweating profusely.
What do you want? We have no ties anymore.
Before I could stop him, he barged into my apartment, shouting,
Where did you hide your father's will?
Saying that, Ryan started searching around my room.
Hey, don't just barge in and make a mess. I'll call the cops. Your dad wrote a will right in front of me, didn't he? Saying he'd leave me that vacation house in Malibu. I can't find that will anywhere. Oh, that will? I've discarded it. What?
Ryan lunged at me, growling.
What the hell did you do? I didn't destroy it, my father did. What do you mean?
While battling a severe illness, my father had painstakingly written that will. But after Ryan left, I had revealed everything that Ryan and my mother-in-law had done to him. Turns out, Ryan had been cheating all the time, and my mother-in-law had been spending money recklessly, even using up all of Ryan's bank savings. Moreover, they'd frequently been asking us for money. I didn't want to distress my father, but I just couldn't trust Ryan and decided to tell the truth. My father felt remorseful for not realizing my situation earlier, but I assured him with a smile.
Dad, I'll be fine. I used to fear being alone, but I'd rather be on my own than to be constantly belittled by people like them. Besides, everyone deserves a second chance.
Hearing that, my father smiled and said, "You've become strong, Catherine." Later, he drafted a proper will and stored it at the town hall.
So, the property is now under my mom's name, and there's no way you can sell it.
Upon hearing this, Ryan's face went pale, and he collapsed to his knees.
Why? I need the money from selling that vacation house. And what's that? For the house you were gonna buy for your mother? Then earn the money yourself. And if you're going to buy a new $400,000 house while still paying off the mortgage for the condo, well, you're such a devoted son, aren't you? It's truly admirable.
When I mentioned this, Ryan mumbled in a low voice.
I can't even afford the mortgage for my own condo. What?
I asked again, but Ryan remained silent. I had seen this coming ever since we'd decided to divorce. Perhaps because Ryan was coddled by his mother his whole life, he had a very fragile mentality. He struggled with work, often becoming overwhelmed quickly. At his job, he could only handle minor tasks, and even when his boss merely advised him to work more efficiently, he'd get sick and take time off. Consequently, he'd end up quitting every new job he took and hop from one job to another. To add insult to injury, he had a wandering eye when it came to women, truly a bad combination.
You're probably taking time off from work again, aren't you?
I asked. In a low voice, Ryan responded.
Well, actually, I quit my job last month and haven't found a new one yet. I'm flabbergasted.
Considering his current situation, it's audacious for him to think he could buy a new house for his mother and manage the mortgage after divorcing me. In reality, when we lived together, I had been covering almost all of our living expenses, from the mortgage to everyday costs.
Come on, Catherine, can't you come back to me? You must be lonely in this place all by yourself, right? Let's face it, you don't have friends, and no guy would ever be interested in you in the future. Let's stop this charade and start over. That's a joke, right?
I shouted, pushing the approaching Ryan away.
You think I'm lonely just because I'm alone? Don't make assumptions about me. I'm not going back to that life with you and your mother. Just thinking about it makes my skin crawl. Catherine, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but I've never felt more free and happy in my life. I can go wherever I want, whenever I want, and do what I love. No one to belittle or mock me. You're nothing more than a pest to me. Get out. But Catherine, if you abandon me,
Even as he tried to cling to me, I gave him a cold stare.
You were always good at fooling women. Remember your mistress? Why don't you ask her for help? Oh, that woman? She left me when she realized I had no money. She's really something, huh?
Who's the real problem here?
I bet you approached me for my money in the first place, right? I remember when we were at the same company, you were always so curious about my family's background.
I remember when I first met Ryan. Every time we met at the company, he would skillfully ask about my family. Now, looking back, I realize how odd it was, but back then, I was so smitten that I didn't notice. I truly feel I was such a fool.
Listen, when I took out the mortgage for the new house, I borrowed some money from a not-so-great source. I planned to repay it immediately, so I didn't care much about the interest. But now, if I can't pay it back, the debt collectors are on me every day. And because of that, I'm getting complaints from other condo residents. You really are an idiot.
I was just astounded at how Ryan kept making things worse for himself. But I had no sympathy for him.
By the way, how about your mom's new husband? He could pay for the new house, right?
It's their home to live in after her remarriage, so it should be an issue to be settled between his mom and her new husband. But Ryan said, actually, he's not working either. Plus, my mom, wanting to feel young since her new husband is 20 years younger, went for plastic surgery.
Plastic surgery? She was planning to pay for the surgery with the money from selling our vacation home. But that plan fell through, so the surgery got halted midway. When her new husband saw her in that state, he took off.
What a pair, this mother and son. Both digging their own graves, It's just unbelievable.
It's awful, right? To leave my mom when she's struggling. Your mom has her own problems, choosing such a man. Planning to live in a house someone else built, and he's not even working. Really, what a terrible choice for a second husband.
Well, with a mother-in-law like that, who else would be attracted to her? As I was internally shaking my head, someone appeared at my house. It was my mother-in-law, her face wrapped in bandages. She entered without asking, approaching me aggressively.
Catherine, you're not planning to abandon my son, are you? Because of you, both my son and I are in a tough spot. You better sell that vacation home and give us the money. What happened to your face? Huh? Because you've been so stingy and not selling the vacation home, my nose surgery got halted. That doctor, once he realized there was no money, just skipped town on me. What? How could this happen?
So she got duped by that doctor too? Just disappearing once he realized she couldn't pay?
I want to get my face fixed by another doctor, but I have no money and don't know what to do. Hey, Catherine. It's your responsibility to help us out. You inherited a good amount of money, didn't you? Hand it over to us.
Faced with such an outrageous demand, I was in shock.
Enough of this. Are you trying to extort me? If you keep this up, I'll call the police on you for trespassing and threats.
My raised voice startled my bandaged mother-in-law, making her flinch.
How dare you yell at an elderly woman in her frail state? You're such a disgraceful daughter-in-law.
I couldn't believe she still thought of my place as hers.
Listen. I have no intention of ever dealing with money grubbers like you. You and your failed excuse of a son there have no choice but to live with the massive debt you've accumulated. If you think someone else is gonna clean up the mess you've made, you're sorely mistaken. And by the way,
as I spoke, she looked at me fearfully. What is it?
I have proof of Ryan cheating on me. During our marriage, I was the one who suffered mentally. I haven't forgiven him for that. I'm gonna sue both of you and take you for all you're worth, so be prepared.
Hearing this, both of their faces turned pale. I pointed to the door, addressing both of them.
If you get it, then stay away from me for good. If you try to approach me again, I'll call the police.
With that, both Ryan and my mother-in-law, scared out of their wits, hurriedly left through the front door. I later found out that Ryan and his mother had to give up their new home. Despite that, they're still being hounded by debt collectors since they borrowed money from shady lenders. Ryan couldn't hold down the next job he found and is now working part-time to make ends meet. With his income, he couldn't pay off the condo's mortgage, so he had to give it up. Now, the two of them live together in a rundown apartment, exposed to the elements. My mother-in-law still hasn't found a doctor to fix her nose and keeps complaining about how cold air makes her nose hurt. This was all information given to me by the attorney I hired.
So, even if you seek compensation now, I don't think you'll get anything back. That's okay. Just make the claim. I just want to push them to their limits mentally,
I said with a smile as I asked my attorney. Later on, I became a certified financial planner and started my own practice. I now consult women struggling with issues like my ex-husband's emotional abuse and difficult relationships with their in-laws, helping them navigate financial challenges during divorce considerations. During this journey, I met a man who understood and genuinely needed my work. He reminded me of my late father, a kind-hearted and gentle man. Spending time with him, I realized what true happiness feels like. You see, there's no rush. There's no need to undervalue yourself. Because you never know when or how you might meet someone special. At this age, I feel like I've finally found my own form